Yes, okay.
Yeah, because we keep mentioning school because we are environment. Welcome to another episode of the Enrahation podcast. My name is Wangeshi Karemi.
And my name is Bikaro Gisambagosh.
Yeah, you had forgotten to say your name.
Yeah.
All right, so in this podcast, we're going to be talking about carrying capacity. We've already talked about biodiversity, and in the biodiversity conversation, we told you why it is essential for the different types of animals, plants, and other living organisms to coexist
Yeah.
interdependently,
Yeah.
which means depending on each other, including you, a human being. Now, today in this one, we're going to be talking about carrying capacity. What is carrying capacity, Bikaro?
Carrying capacity. Yet again, I'm just smiling because I'm thinking of the easiest way to say this. Carrying capacity. Well, carrying capacity is the ability. How do I explain carrying without saying carry? Lift. That's just another word for carrying. But anyway,
Oh, yeah,
when
you
it
can
comes
actually
to
use the word lift.
lift.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes to when it comes to nature, it's basically the ability of the ecosystem around you or the environment or whatever system supports that are around you, the ability to hold you up. That is the ability to provide whatever services they're providing to you, and at the same time, just the ability of this system around you to provide whatever services it's providing to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have an analogy.
Oh,
You see, a lift has maximum capacity of
I
what
gave
it
that
can
idea.
carry. The maximum capacity that a lift can carry is the carrying capacity of
Yeah.
that lift. Yeah. So now we extend this information to other places. Yeah. The environment has the maximum number of it can carry. Now that's off, we've left a dash to define people, living organisms,
biodiversity.
biodiversity. There's a limit to which it can carry, and it's normally dependent on a lot of things. Just like a lift, when you're 50 people in a lift, the amount of air might not be enough.
Yeah.
Now a lift might be able to carry the weight, but the oxygen will not be enough to serve all of you people.
Yeah.
So then that is not the carrying capacity of that. You have exceeded the carrying capacity. You can't breathe enough air in that lift. If you can't toshare, like size wise, so maybe you're just fat people, even if you've not gotten
I'm just
thick big people, even if you've not gotten to the maximum weight, when it comes to the conversation of size, you have exceeded the carrying capacity.
You're too heavy for that
You're
lift.
too-
It cannot
you're too
support
wide.
you.
In this case, you're too wide for that lift. Yeah, it cannot
It
support
cannot
you.
support you.
We
Yeah.
can talk about weight. You might be very tiny as a person, but you're very, very heavy. And the maximum weight that lift can carry is 50 kilograms. And you're 51.
Yeah,
You
cannot
have exceeded the carrying capacity
of that lift.
It's
Yeah.
the same notion when it comes to environmental sustainability and environmental conversations. It's how much can our ecosystems, how much can our environment handle of us, of different species, without depleting the different resources that it has.
Yeah.
Whether we're talking about food, we're talking about space, we're talking about air, we're talking about the basic interdependence. At what point do we say that our environment has reached its carrying capacities?
Yeah.
It's when the resources are just enough without the risk of what? Depletion. It's not like you're fighting for air, it's that the air is enough for
all
you,
of you.
for me, and for everyone else.
Whatever ecosystem is around us is able to provide its services sufficiently to us.
Yes.
Comfortably. Yeah.
Without the risk of depletion.
Yeah.
And now let's put this theoretically into like the conversations in environmental science. We come to the conversation of like a land that has land. Just let's talk about land. There is space within which you people can live in, and you feel you're comfortable. And the land can still sustain you in the sense that there's enough air for you to breathe. There's enough land to produce
farm.
food for you to eat. There is enough land for you to actually fulfill your cultural desires when it comes to praying, playing. It's both.
Go on, yeah.
It's both. Actually, it's both. Like the
praying
religion
and
aspect
playing.
and the praying and the playing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Both of them. If you can fulfill all of these desires without feeling inhibited by the environment that you are in, then you have not exceeded
Its
the
carrying capacity.
Yes.
When we talk about land, this is where we come up with the issues of land fragmentation. You find that they've divided land up so much that it cannot produce, it cannot keep giving you whatever it's supposed to be
Yes,
giving,
yeah.
whatever it's supposed to be giving. Okay, it cannot keep sustaining you. It will not produce as much as it's supposed to produce. Yeah.
Yeah, so when you cut down land so that everyone just has enough to build like a home, and then now you don't have enough to farm and things like that. By the end of the day, you find that in that land there's not enough food.
Yeah.
Now you have to outsource food.
Yeah.
You have exceeded the what? The carrying
Carrying
capacity
of that specific plot. Yeah.
Yeah, of that specific lot.
Yeah.
And also, when we normally talk about the conversation on population, people normally be like, I mean, God is giving me these kids. Can I just not have them? Whatever, whatever, whatever. But population is another aspect when we talk about carrying capacity.
Yeah.
It's that this piece of land, I remember in school.
Yes, again.
Yeah, because we keep mentioning school because we are environmental studies graduates. Yes, we are. But we used to have one of our lecturers, Dr. Cecilia. She's an anthologist. She'd draw the map of Kenya, and then she'd write in 1990 this was the population.
Yeah.
This is the population today. We have like tripled. Is it?
We are I think at 54 million right now.
And I feel like there was a time we were at 9 million.
Do you know the population in Australia is around 25 million?
Only.
That's
the entire country. Australia.
Yes. Kenya, we are 54 anyway.
And Kenya is so small. When you look at it from the map, it's so small. Now, if we keep populating Kenya, if we keep giving birth, and please don't get me wrong, I am not here to tell people not to give birth. I am just saying, think about your land, think about the resources that you have, and then think about the carrying capacity of those resources. I mean, this notion can be extended to a lot of things, including to the economic values, the economic valuables. Yeah. If they cannot handle whatever you're bringing to them, you will have exceeded the carrying capacity.
At the end of the day, if you keep overwhelming the systems that provide us services, they won't be able to deliver
those services. Whether it is water, we say like this water can feed 100 people.
Yeah. If you overconsume, you're gonna be without water.
You're gonna deplete the sources of water, and that is actually happening in the world. There's depletion of waters,
groundwater resources.
Yes,
we over abstract and over abstract and over abstract. At the end of the day, we have our ground without water.
Yeah. And now that we have no ground water source because we have depleted everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's pretty basic content. Its carrying capacity is basically the definition of the amount of resources that can
what's available, and the consumer and the producer. So if the consumer is taking up more than the producer can provide, at the end of the day, the burden is going to be on the producer. And if it's not regenerating in fast enough, the resource is gonna deplete.
So that is basically what carrying capacity is. Now, in this conversation of carrying capacity, we always try to advocate for people to avoid the risk of depletion of resources. The risk of depletion of resources does not mean that you use up to the edge. No, it's you live in a state where you can, these resources will be available for this generation and also for the future generation, whether it is the lakes, the forests, and it's everything, even the libraries, even artificial goods, even philanthropic acts. You cannot misuse them, because once you misuse them, you use them to an extent where they cannot be given back to you. You've depleted. We are consuming more than we are producing. We are consuming more than whatever the source is able to regenerate. At the end of the day, we don't have. That's why we advocate for reusing, recycling. Things like that. It is important for us to understand that there's a maximum carrying capacity of this planet. There's a maximum carrying capacity of Kenya as a land, as Kenya as an environment. There's a maximum carrying capacity of your land at home. There's so much maize that you can plant in that land. You can't plant any more than that amount. There's so much water that you can get from the world, from the planet. There's so much this that you can do. And because of that thought, that continuously thinking that everything is not in abundance. It's not like, yes, it's in abundance, but it's not unlimited. There is some sort of limit. There's some sort of threshold of use. Makes you live sustainably. Makes you aware that by the end of the day, I don't need to leave my tap running. I don't need to leave my tap running, because if there's much as it's available, water, as much as it's available, you're still consuming what somebody else might have been consuming down the line. So now let's talk about what affects carrying capacity, in the sense that we understand that there's a limit to the amount that we can get from the world. There's a limit to the water, the air, and to other ecological services that we are given by the planet. So what are some of these things that limit the amount of what we can get available? Well, for starters, resource availability. If it's not available
talk of renewable and non-renewable resources.
Yes.
If you say you're digging up oil from the ground, if you keep digging, at the end of the day itaisha. If you keep taking up, okay, water is okay, it's a different case, but if you keep digging up oil itaisha at the end of the day.
Yes.
Yeah, so if this resource is not like fully abundant in nature, itaisha at the end of the day.
Yeah. And
But
that is something that when we talk about climate change, when we're having the conversation of climate change, just digress a little bit, we normally advocate for renewable sources.
renewable resources, yeah.
The ones that will be there today and then they'll still be there tomorrow.
Yeah.
So that if we are able to tap into what is always going to exist, we will have unlimited access to this source of energy. However, the current and the most popular sources of energy up to this very day are the non-renewables. Yeah.
Resources, yeah.
The ones that once you're done with it, you can never get it back.
True.
And this comes from even the basic, like wood. Unless you plant that tree, if you cut down the wood, that automatically, if you cut down the tree, that automatically is non-renewable.
Yeah.
Unless now you take up the activity
To plant
planting again.
That you're just ensuring regeneration.
That you're now ensuring that it is going to be renewable in some sense.
Yeah.
We have the oil, the mining of oil and coal. Now those ones are non-renewables.
Yeah.
They are set and they're stored in the earth. Now if you keep mining them, one day we'll be rid of it.
Yeah.
And there are consequences to altering the natural balance of things. We have talked about in this conversation why climate change is a big issue and why it is human caused. So now in this sense, we need to remember that every single time we get something from the environment, there's some sort of consequence, especially if it is non-renewable.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So what is another factor that affects the carrying capacity?
We have talked about population, but yeah, we can say it again. If you have people consuming so much than what is available, at the end of the day, it's gonna end.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's not going to be enough for everyone.
Yeah. And
then now we start suffering. There's an analogy. Okay, not an analogy. There's in the Bible. People when we have the conversation on population, people normally say, "But I was told to multiply
and fill the earth." Yeah.
And there was this someone who was talking and he was saying, but now Adam and Eve were given the title deed, hold the planet.
Yeah.
You have no title, you have no land, you have no home, you have nothing, but you're filling the earth.
Yeah.
Which one? Whose carrying capacity are you trying to fill? And it is important. It's a very important conversation to have, because if your resources cannot hold what you have,
why do you keep consuming?
Why do you keep
populating?
Why do you keep populating? Why do you keep adding past the carrying capacity of that land?
Yeah.
And what we are saying is, if that land cannot, if it exists as carrying capacity, resources start becoming unavailable. So food becomes scarce, water becomes scarce, and other resources, necessary resources, start becoming scarce. So what happens when the resources become scarce? You die.
You die because you don't have anything to live on.
So why are you populating so people can die?
Yeah.
Okay. And now the question of to whom is this conversation going to? Everyone.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not just you and your 15 kids, just everyone.
Yeah, and this is where the entire concept of Earth Overshoot Day comes in, whereby at a specific day in a year, you have already consumed the resources that were set out for that year.
Yeah.
We recently had the, I think, Earth Water Day. By that time, I think we had consumed up enough. I might be spreading rumors, but we have the Earth Water Day as well. But what I'm most sure about is the Overshoot Day. By this particular time of the year, by this particular date of the year, you've already consumed up the resources that were meant to last for the entire year. By this time, you've already consumed them up.
Yeah. So if you keep consuming it like that, it means at a certain point in this, like in the years to come, the resources are not going to be available for that generation.
Because you've been borrowing
from the yeah. You have been taking what is not supposed to be for this generation, for this time, and you have been using it up, which means at some point, your generation is not going to exist.
There's not enough resources to serve the population, which brings us back to sustainability again, which is something we're going to talk about in future. But yeah, again, just consuming enough to make sure that the coming generations have enough to live on as well. Yeah.
And because this podcast is the climate and sustainable development and environmental sustainability podcast, let's talk about the interrelationship between climate change and carrying capacity. Now, what happens when climate change happens is that there's a change in the climatic conditions.
Yeah.
Now, climatic conditions are some of the things that affect the carrying capacity of this land. There's the optimum amount of temperatures, there's the optimum amount of rain, precipitation that is, there's the optimum amount of everything that exists so that this land can be able to handle the population, to handle the species that it has. Yeah. Now, when climate change happens, it alters all of these things. It alters precipitation, it alters the temperatures, it alters the pH levels, yada 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 yada.
Just alters the resource availability.
By the end of the day, now alters resource availabilities and the ability of this land, this environment, to be able to hold the population and the species that it is holding today. So as the climate change is continuing like that, some species are nearing extinction, including the human species. The more the climate changes,
I really think you're gonna end.
I feel like at some point we're gonna end. If it continues to change, or we're going to adapt. And the adaptation, before adaptation happens, there's always like
massive deaths.
Yes, natural selections. The ones that are unable to adapt.
Yeah.
The ones that are able to adapt, we stay. Yes, we grow longer noses.
You think?
I will be there. I will be there. I will be there. If it is this generation, I will be there. Yes, manifestation. No, but that's the whole idea of how nature works. That once changes start happening, when climate changes, it changes all of these things associated with weather patterns, the pH, the temperatures, the wind, things like that. If the carrying capacity of this land if this ecosystem dependent on wind being existent there, and wind is no longer existent there, automatically that species either adapts or goes extinct.
Yeah.
And before adaptation, we've said kuna natural selection, where now so many have to die trying.
Yeah. Die trying.
And then the few make it.
Yeah, the few make it.
And we normally speak about this as if it's just an elephant thing, since they changed from the fluffy, ones,
the mammoths
to what we are today. Yeah. No, it's not just about elephants. It's also human beings. When you look at the history of human beings, we've changed over time. There are so many changes that have happened over time. But the land's carrying capacity is normally dependent on a lot of things, including these weather conditions.
Yeah.
And that is where the conversation on climate change and carrying capacity happens.
Yeah.
And also, like, if there's no more water because of climate change, that land
will not be able to produce.
The resources are not there.
Yeah.
Resources have been depleted. The carrying capacity is reduced significantly. Yeah. So today, what is our takeaway, Bikor?
Well, our takeaway is that we are supposed to live within our means. Live within whatever we have been given.
What has been provided.
Don't overuse just because it's there. If you're overusing just because it's there, just know you're taking up from someone else who would have been using it at a later generation. Yeah.
And also, even in this generation, some of you are just producing so many kids. And this family land is only one egg. And who will not have land? Who are you saying will not have land? Yeah. I'm just playing. But it's so important to think about those things. Even when you're planning your family. Kids come from wherever you think they come from, and they are a blessing from wherever they come from. But it is important to think about your personal carrying capacity. Before even you get to Kenya, carrying capacity. What is your carrying capacity? What capacity are you able to carry? Like that lift that we talked about when we started the conversation. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time, where we'll be talking about sustainable
development.
Yeah.
See you next time.
Statements.
Okay. Bye-bye.